So it's a new year. We're doing a first episode for 2021 for Building the Open Web podcast. Today we have my colleague from near Moloch here with me, and also James Young, the guest. Thank you for joining us. James, maybe we can start by giving a brief background on what you're up to these days.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sasha and Matt. Great to be here. I am the CEO of Abridged, and we have a consumer product called Collab.Land that allows on Telegram and Discord, if you allow the Collab.Land bot to be an admin, to make sure that all the users in the chats own a certain token and have a certain amount of that token to be able to chat. So what we do is reduce the coordination for token holders to be able to speak with one another.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about Collab.Land further on. Wanted to start overall, as we always start with a background. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in California in the Bay Area. So I was born in San Francisco, grew up in San Mateo, kind of prior or pre-Silicon Valley, or as it was forming up with, back in the day, then it was pre-web, and it was really more like the Silicon in Silicon Valley, and then moved to the East Bay. So I grew up in the Bay Area.
Got it. And how was it growing up back then during the kind of like early days of Silicon Valley?
It was great. It was great. Like, back then, I don't know what or why my dad really wanted me to get into computers. I was kind of like this latchkey kid. So I would be, just home alone, and my dad gave me a computer. And the best thing back then, I had this Apple IIe, and just my dad would drive me to random people's houses to like he didn't understand that I was buying these pirated games, and I would just like in my floppy drive load the games and play for hours with friends, and then that led into pre-internet getting into messaging or bulletin boards, and yeah, I was just really interested in that. I remember being, this is the days where you actually tied up the modem line. Actually, there was no dedicated internet connection. So having a 9600 baud modem was like super fast and amazing. And, as a young kid, just typing random swear words into a bulletin board. And then the sysops, as they call it back then, would call my house because they had my phone number because I put it in when I was registering it. And then my mom telling me, hey, there's this guy, this friend saying that they're going to kick you out of this thing. And it was just like this interesting dynamics. And, most of it was, being a little kind of pushing the edge when it comes to what you can do kind of as a kid online. So, or not online, but on computers. And I remember one incident where like I used to talk a lot in class. And so, I had to come home with scripts, meaning the teacher would assign me this, I will not be a blabbermouth in class. And I would have to write that 500 times. And I said, you know what? Maybe I can write a program that will do this for me. And so, I in BASIC, 10 print, I will not be a blabbermouth in class, 20 go to 10, and just print it out 500 times. I brought it to class, and then my teacher said, did you really type this? And in my mind, I was like, yeah. And after that, she let me talk in class whenever I wanted. She thought that this was amazing. You like typed all of this out. And then in her eyes, it kind of changed her view of me. And early on, that's when I said, oh, you know what? I think I want to become a programmer. It allows me to do things in kind of this magical way. And that was kind of like the first glimpse of it all.
That's awesome. And for Bay Area at that time, was it kind of like a place with a lot of early users of the internet, or was it fairly evenly spread out, the early internet?
I think a lot of the early internet access really happened for me when I was in school. and having just a school email was fascinating, and being able to email people instantly, where before, I was on a computer and you would timeshare a computer, and on the Unix command line you say talk and then see who's online. You would like quote unquote finger people to see who is on, and then you could just like talk to them. And then having this email using Pine back in the day was like kind of this magical experience. And what I saw was it was really through the kind of university setting that you saw a lot of the high-speed internet and what was going to happen a few years down the line. And so, I think it was through there. That's at schools when I like really saw NCSA Mosaic for the first time. This is when like I got introduced to startups. So that was really the like .com 1.0. With that, my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, was waiting for me to graduate. I was doing some research at the Berkeley Multimedia Research Center. Had a friend who was a grad student working on search. This is pre-Google. So it was a company called Inktomy. And so my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, got a job there. She was like employee number 13 at Inktomy, and was one of the first kind of like IPOs. And that was like super fascinating, and it kind of opened up this whole world of just what it would look like to have the internet be mainstream. And I was like totally bought in. And from there saw the rise of the dot-com boom and then the bust, and just kind of the dark days of the bust of like, oh, we thought the internet was going to be a thing, but it probably is not never going to be a thing. They can't really like figure out the business model or what the future of this internet, how we're going to make money off of it, because it was all about eyeballs back then and about IPOing, but that there really wasn't back then that substance. And then that led to kind of the beginnings of Web 2.0. And I think that while everyone during that dot-com bust phase were scared, because they're like, okay, we thought that this was going to be an industry. It doesn't look like it's going to become an industry, but we still are passionate about it. Let's try to figure out certain things. Let's try user-generated content. And this is when you really saw like the rise of Flickr and kind of people doing things initially like on Friendster and on Tribe.net. And you saw kind of really great interactions. I don't know if you guys remember LiveJournal, but that was great. And I guess we could talk about this later, but I think that really prepped me for crypto. And there's a lot of analogies going back, and a lot of similarity. They say that history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And so was able to really take what happened in the context of like 2018, 2019, and pretty much for a lot of 2020 into account, and saying, well, this is actually, the bear market is actually the best time to innovate, and this is where people are retracting and like having their doubts, but this is the time I'm gonna like go full head on in, and that's kind of what I did. But yeah, so I think that was a great breeding ground for what would happen later in life for me.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So it sounds like there are quite a bit of similarities,
Yes.
but it's also not exactly the same. And what was your first interaction with crypto? How did you get into this new industry?
I got in it through my connections through .com. So I actually got in it through Ripple, to be honest. And then that led me to Bitcoin. And there was this, Ripple Labs had this project called Codius. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to write programs using the V8 like Node.js back then. And this was around the time because I was going to like San Francisco JavaScript meetups, like Ryan Dahl, the creator of Node, was still like there doing Node.js and leading these workshops. This was kind of at the beginning. I remember going to Dogpatch Labs, and this was before Instagram was before it was called Instagram. It was called Bourbon, and they were working there and just trying to like figure this stuff out. And I was like, Codius sounds great, like crypto, and you can have a programming language behind it, and that was interesting. There were some technical issues with regards to security back then that it never really took off, but that kind of primed me and set the stage for exposure to Bitcoin. At that time, I had moved from the gaming industry to the online advertising industry and was trying to figure out, okay, well, is there ways to like solve for fraud online? And it was just, the concept of Bitcoin, this, ledger, I didn't quite understand when I first delved into it, all the technical scalability issues and whatnot. But I remember like I remember my first thoughts with Bitcoin. It was like $60. This is outrageous.
Well, thank you. That was really great. And quick question. So how did you decide to work on Molok?
Oh yeah. So Moloch was interesting because we're fascinated with like reducing coordination costs. So we started Moloch actually when we were doing ad token. And this was when I was in the online advertising industry. How do we reduce fraud? Well, the problem on online advertising industry is that everyone has their own data store. So if there was this like canonical data store, wouldn't it be great? Everyone could reference that and there would not be discrepancies in terms of impressions and whatnot. And we're like, wow, the blockchain would be great. And at the same time, when this was happening, was watching what was going on with the DAO. So this was like summer 2016. And from that, had conversations through contacts at Microsoft with Consensus, the company in Brooklyn. And at that time, I thought it was a pretty huge company. It was like 100 people or close to 100 people, and had met, Mike Golden, Amin Soleimani, and some other folks who I can't remember their names right now, so I apologize. But we thought, okay, well, if we want to tackle the solution to, this ad fraud, we need a canonical source. But how do we know who's right and who's wrong? So, this idea of this token curated registry where you actually have a game. And my premise, thinking about reducing coordination costs, was that, what? If you can properly devise the right game, then, you can do powerful things. Munger says, I'll show you the outcomes, if I know the incentives. And so that was kind of the premise that we were thinking about in terms of this token curated registry. And then from that, we implemented it and realized, actually it takes a minute for someone to cast a vote. And, there were a lot of these like UX issues where people would just give up. And coming from the gaming industry prior to online advertising, this friction and like user drop off was really kind of top of mind for me. And so initially I thought, and this is kind of like the backdrop of crypto for me. I think I can see the problem. I solve that problem. That spots like a deeper problem. And then so I go and try to fix that. So we went from ad token, and to bring this back to Moloch was like, you know what? We just need a really simple kind of way of coordinating that doesn't require like this bigger game. And so we were working on Moloch actually in the background while we're doing ad token launches. We're playing around with Moloch just kind of as a side thing. And then I think it was like November-ish, December of 2018. And what happened was Vitalik was on Twitter. People were saying, hey, we need funding for ETH 2.0 research. Can you help us? We're not funded, blah, blah, blah. And Vitalik's like, YOLO, here's some money. And then someone else would say, hey, we need some help too. We're doing ETH 2.0. And Vitalik's like, okay, here you go. He did it like 2 or 3 times. And then we're like, wait a minute, like we have this thing on the shelf called Molok. Maybe that could help out. And that kind of was like how, I think it was like November-ish of 2018. We're like, okay, you know what? We just got to release Molok at the next ETH Global event. We're just going to launch it. What was the next ETH Global event? We looked on the calendar. Oh, it was ETH Denver. I think 2019. Wow, it's almost been 2 years now. It's coming up on 2 years. So yeah, that was kind of the impetus. And then Molok was a little bit more complicated than the first version we released, but we had this like time factor of like, we just got to get this out the door by we give ourselves a forcing function. And so with that, we trimmed out a lot of Molok, and we just, kind of YOLO'd and just say, we got to just launch this. And that's kind of how Molok came to exist.
I have a fun fact about that. So I was the content organizer that year, and I'm the reason it was done on stage because I snuck you guys in. I blew away a break time, and then everybody was like, "What? There's no breaks? What?"
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, it was a team effort. But yeah, I can't believe that's been like almost 2 years ago now. Back then, when we launched that, we're just like, yeah, maybe it would be amazing if we were able to like collectively get like $100,000. Wouldn't that be amazing? And then, provide grants for ETH 2.0 research. And then, it just kind of, there was, I guess, pent up demand. And this was kind of fulfilling my initial curiosity from the original DAO. Because when I looked at the original DAO, I was like, it totally blew my mind. And like, I never thought I would be able to like ever contribute to something like that ever. To me, it just seemed totally unattainable. And then a few years later, like I'm helping out with Molok. And I think that's a testament to like the crypto kind of ecosystem that I really love. It's just the collaboration, everyone being open and helpful and paying it forward. And to bring that back to kind of growing up in the Bay Area, that was always kind of the ethos and the sentiment. Like what you see now, I guess, in like Silicon Valley, big tech monoculture is not what I experienced at all, like growing up. And it was so refreshing. And, this is why it was, I hold like the whole crypto ecosystem dear to my heart, because it's that like collaboration, that experimentation. And, like the early Apple ads kind of capture that, like being wacky, kind of kooky, kind of crazy, doing these experiments is really what I love, like not just the technology, but as part of just the ecosystem.
And what brings you then to start Abridged? When was it, and what was their takeaways from maybe Molok or other places that led you to starting Abridged?
Yeah, so between Moloch and Abridged, I was at Spankchain, and what we realized was that these other projects that were saying that they're going to create layer 2 solutions, and the main impetus for me coming off of ad chain or ad token was, the user experience needs to actually be much better, and we need to scale, and this was what layer 2 is supposed to help out with. And so that was kind of my impetus there, at Spankchain to really drive scalability and usability. So going back, I thought the problem was game theory. You fix the game theory, everything is fine. You get the incentives right, great. What I learned from that was there's a usability issue. There's friction there, right? And so I thought, okay, well, if we can have layer 2 instant transaction, great. What I learned from Spankchain, even though we had a great layer 2 solution, was MetaMask was still kind of an issue. And so I was like, okay, there's still friction. And so we see this like big drop off. I was reading an interview with the crypto kitty Dapper Lab. They were saying they had over 90% drop off or something crazy like that. Just to like, not only got to go install MetaMask, how are you going to get crypto? Oh, Normie's going to go to Coinbase. You got to sign up for coin, and then you got to wait a couple days. You got to upload your, bank account information, and then you can start transacting. So, there was this, like, what opened up to me was this, like, usability issue. And so with Abridged, after Spank Chain, what I really wanted to address was that usability. And so what I saw from coming down the roadmap from a technical perspective was this opcode called Create2, where you can counterfactually instantiate a contract. And I thought, okay, well, really, people talk about public and private keys. They're keys. The word is key to unlock something. It's not where you hold your funds. And so I was thinking, okay, well, the way to solve for this friction of onboarding and public and private keys, because there's this, like, paradox, right? Don't give out your private key, because if you do, someone will steal your funds, right? But if you lose it, you're going to lose all your crypto. So there's like this, like, paradox. So how do you solve that? And I saw the account abstraction with contract wallets, and this upcoming Create2 help solve that problem. Because if you want to launch a contract that holds funds, who's going to pay for that gas? And I saw the Create2 as a way to kind of flip the script, if you will. So you can have it, and once money is there, then you can counterfactually deploy and take the refund through meta transactions from that. And that all came about because we had launched Molok, and while that was great, what I really wanted to try to help kind of move forward is, like, it was very technical with ETH 2.0 Molok serving the kind of ETH 2.0 kind of research there. I thought, okay, I'm going to bring it up the stack. I helped start MetaCartel, which was at the application layer. And it was like, and the reason why it's called MetaCartel is because it was a group starting from meta transaction relayers. And so it was around that time with meta transaction relayers, and then starting the MetaCartel DAO, and then this Create2 coming on board that kind of inspired me to start Abridged and have these counterfactual based wallets, so that you can have proper account abstraction, where you can have someone else have a key. So in case you lose as a user your key in local storage, you can have a guardian recover their key. So it's much in the same concept as popular wallets like Argent. But then we wanted to make sure that the user always had the sovereignty. So we didn't want to recreate a centralized solution, so that the user, once they're incentivized, because maybe at $2 or $5 they want a guardian, but at like $100 or $200, when the stakes are high enough for them, they can remove that guardian. So it came up with this notion of incremental or progressive decentralization. And I can talk a lot about that, because when I talk about that issue, there are kind of two camps. There's the camp of, start centralized and then go decentralized, where it's more like you have a tricycle and then you learn to ride a bike. Whereas the progressive decentralization is you ride a bike with training wheels and you slowly let the training wheels off. And so I have a lot of conversations kind of from a UI UX perspective in terms of those two camps. And that's what we've seen with the Abridged SDK. We abstracted and made the interaction to deploy contract, meta transaction relay, or layer 2 solutions easy to approach for the Web 2 developer. But it was like this weird corner we kind of backed ourselves into, because when we were talking to these developers, they're like, yeah, we integrated. This is great. It all works. But they didn't really understand crypto. And so while at first my ego was like, hey, we did such a great job, like the onboarding and the using of our SDK is so easy, it led us to then say, you know what, like a realization of, do then we take on the responsibility of educating these developers into Web3, which was kind of beyond our tooling, but were 90% of the questions that were being asked. And so what we decided to do was take that and bring it up a level to the app level. And that's how we transitioned from the Abridged SDK to Collab.Land. because we had worked with, I'd worked with Molok and MetaCartel, and we saw these DAO-based organizations start working. And the original version of Collab.Land was actually, you can launch a DAO, create proposals, and vote for proposals all within Telegram initially via buttons. And we had the Abridged SDK, you had the custodian being able to do things on your behalf and all of that. But what we ended up doing is kind of just doing token permissioning for now, because that's where the market is. And that's kind of this lesson that I'm learning right now at Abridged with the SDK and with Collab.Land as kind of this community first development. So you go where the demand is, and don't be too far ahead of the curve, because what I've learned is over my time as a developer, I get enamored with the shiny new thing. And I realized being too far ahead of the curve can be sometimes worse than being too far behind.
Isn't it almost like we live in this bubble, like in the crypto space, and a lot of this stuff just comes like second nature to us, handling keys, wallets, different, like we probably have tried like dozens of wallets and, like having a bunch of different accounts. But if you think about it, most users are really just kind of, they're chatting in a few apps. That's it. I mean, and I know there's a lot of messenger apps, but it's a whole different paradigm shift. And so doesn't it come down to we have all these awesome ideas and we can definitely bring these features to people, but to do that one killer feature that the community is asking for almost perfectly, or to do it very, very well is also in and of itself, it's kind of fascinating, right? Because you guys just kind of, you scoped it down and then you iterated on this and now you've sort of kind of nailed it. That shift is kind of, I feel like I'm just trying to paraphrase what you were saying, but
yeah, it's a good point. So what I see is this contention where it's okay, it was hard for some people, technically minded, to acquire crypto to gain it. It's almost like a badge of honor. And it's almost like looking down at others. If you don't get it, then it shouldn't be for you. And that goes back to this monoculture of being in the in club or whatnot. And that's not what I think is productive. And it's really just trying to make it available to the masses. And for me, I love to geek out on this tech stuff. But really, why am I doing this? Well, it's, I do believe in this notion of decentralization. And how do you get there? It may not look like what you do at the start. And so this is where it's I see, even with Collab.Land, there are two main user bases, right? There's the Web3 native that loves MetaMask and Wallet Connect. And they're the ones that are going to really spark and really start this. And it's not going to be mainstream. That's why, to be honest, with Collab.Land, we don't even have the Abridged SDK integrated, right? Because it's a different market, and understanding having that perspective of that where the market is at right now. And we'll have it. We have the integration already, and it's just knowing when to deploy it when that market emerges. And you can see kind of successful startups finding that beachhead. What is that beachhead that you started with? For Uber, I don't think ever meant to just stay with black cars, but that's where they started, because that was their beachhead. That was where the market was at the beginning, and it allows them to get a toehold and then spread. And I think that when we look at Collab.Land, I look at the numbers. We started only on Telegram, which was, kind of crypto native. But now we're seeing the kind of numbers shift to Discord, where it's more early adopters. And so I think we're kind of on the precipice, and I think social tokens are kind of that area, because with DeFi is great for Ethereum, but it's more financial engineering. It's a little bit more heady, where I think NFTs and social tokens, people can kind of better understand. And I think, everything that in the backdrop of the pandemic, price action that's happening now, the demonetization of creators on different platforms, I think there's something brewing there. I don't know exactly what, but there is this direction toward like passion economy or ownership economy, whatever you want to call it.
Let's drill in a little bit more from like the user perspective, because I want to know what this journey looks like. So I'm someone that doesn't have crypto, like doesn't have anything. Is there a way or an effective way for me to get into a Discord channel and to hold social tokens? And if so, could you just like maybe just spell out like how that would happen? But let's stick with like, like an Alice or Bob kind of scenario.
Now, that's a great question. And that's really kind of this next phase, right? And that's what we're prepping for. I think it needs, from like a technical perspective, kind of a shift where you think about onboarding on layer 2 first. So if you have a layer 2 first position, Alice can OAuth via Discord, get a key pair, right? She can get a key pair through services like Taurus. And I think Taurus is multi-chain, right? That key pair is in local storage. If you dig a little bit deeper in terms of the Shamir shared secrets that Taurus supports and where they're going, you can say, okay, there's this opportunity for exit and decentralization. So, I'm always of two minds, right? Ease of use to get people on board for the user, but not stuck. There always needs to be like a road or a path to exit somehow for self.
And I just want to be clear. So why is so layer 2, just to define, it's a layer built on top of Ethereum, like usually cheaper, faster, something like that, more application specific. Why is it important that Alice starts on layer 2?
So Alice starts on layer 2 because, one, there aren't any transaction fees. They don't have to pay. Alice doesn't have gas. Especially for social tokens that are just beginning to launch, it's a bummer that if the transaction fees are 10 times more than the value you're sending, because you're trying to grow a community, right?
Especially if you're running the app, right? Like, let's drop Alice 1,000 James Young tokens, and it's going to cost the app itself like $5 to do it. That doesn't make any sense. It means like, you're just basically burning up $5 every time somebody joins your server.
That's right. And that's why layer 2 is important. In all layer 2 constructions, there are many different types, but they all rely on the same cryptography as the underlying blockchain. So it's just signed messages going back and forth. So you can honor those. So the idea is you start Alice on layer 2, airdrop via channel, and in the background, and this is what we're working on for Collab.Land, you open up a channel and you airdrop over layer 2 because there was initial setup of like the community or the creator, a community admin or a creator, depositing that initial amount on chain, and then now they can like begin to airdrop off chain. And this also sets up this interesting dynamic where the sender doesn't have to, like you were saying, Matt, pay for the airdrop every single time. What's happening is now you're flipping the interaction where now it's the receiver being able to withdraw and the receiver paying, and they're more incentivized because they want this value, and there's like a fee, and they're like, okay, I'll pay that fee. The trick is, and this is what we learned early on with the Abridged SDK, was that if the user has to hold ETH on layer 1 and then hold this separate token on layer 2, and they don't have enough ETH on layer 1 to like withdraw, it becomes an issue. And the mental model was like, wait, I have this L1 balance, I have this L2 balance, like what's going on? I just want my tokens back. And so we have a meta transaction relayer so that if the token has a liquidity pool on Uniswap, the meta transaction relayer will accept payment in that token and then immediately be able to swap it out to get refunded the gas for that transaction, so that Alice then on withdrawal never has to hold ETH. They're just holding that social token. So Alice, OAuth, Taurus, airdrops, does some things, tips back and forth, community interaction, unlock channels, do some things, and then wants to withdraw. Alice just needs that token to withdraw.
Have you seen any kind of data points around drop-off rates? Like, I'll be curious back to this what Matt mentioned about like new users starting and completely has no understanding of crypto at all, and you build all of these constructs to like make UX as good as possible. And so, what is roughly is a success rate for every like 100 people trying to get onboarded?
It's interesting because there is a whole UX issue, but UX only, I see of UX as an optimization. When I look at the communities, these like drop-off rates really are context dependent, because some of these communities, while they require MetaMask, have like a large success rate. And it's because the user wants that reward. And if the desire is great enough, if they can win and get this thing, they'll go through the pain. And I think as technologists, there's this latent masochism where you're like, I want to solve the problem. So the reward of being able to do it is kind of the reward in itself. But for an average user, like if the community can articulate that reward, then people kind of will go through that pain. And the UI UX, while it's super important and it will decrease the barrier, it doesn't speak to what that user can win at the end. So the reason why I say that is that even with like MetaMask now, like CryptoKitties 2017, you saw this big drop-off rate because people didn't quite understand what NFTs were in 2017 or what they could become. We're just beginning to understand that now. And so right now you see better kind of, and MetaMask has a mobile and their UX is a little bit better. And we have 4 years of kind of DApp research to kind of optimize UI UX with notifications. Block Native has a great kind of widget that helps with notifications. Oh, your transaction has been submitted, and then now it's been mined, where before you send and you're like, okay, let me just refresh Etherscan, every 500 milliseconds or something like that. So I think even with like, so I don't want to like overemphasize the UI UX. It's really this community and the goals. And this is where I see social tokens and the communities that really, there's a stark difference between the communities that are doing it right and the communities that aren't. And it really is that narrative and that articulation of that winning that thing. And they'll go through that pain. I heard similar kind of stories when it came to like when Reddit was first starting. They didn't have the best UI UX, but they had these great communities. And I think for DeFi, that's definitely true. It's an extrinsic value, number go up kind of reward. I think with social tokens, there's this combination of extrinsic and intrinsic connection with people in a community that we're seeing, in those communities that can articulate and have those values set out at the beginning in very clear and strong terms. You see better kind of completion rates when it comes to, I think you're talking about funnel analysis.
And I think Matt actually wanted to discuss social tokens as well, correct? Maybe I'll let Matt phrase the exact question.
Yeah, so I wanted to dive into a little bit more about maybe where you think it's going. So we have social tokens, community tokens that can sort of, basically define a super fan for a creator. We have community tokens that can sort of gate off a community, like with Abridged and this Discord bot. We can do some of the stuff like that, but in terms of like, I guess like where it could go, I was actually just talking to some people in Clubhouse last night. We were talking about musicians, pre-selling their next album and then basically distributing a share of the revenues. That's a traditional sort of I mean, it's a little different because it's basically like crowdsourcing investment as opposed to going to a label and then basically paying back the revenues through your fan base. What are some other ideas or things that you think are like native to crypto, native to blockchain that are going to make social tokens like explode? Because I know you're like deep in that community, so you probably have heard, a whole bunch of crazy ideas. And I just want to kind of talk about that idea space for a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating and I love it. Like going back to like the whole, like when, the web 1.0 bubble burst and people were just experimenting. I have that same energy, but it's like 10x this time, right? It's super fascinating. And I think there's a lot of experimentation movement, and what will work is something that we don't even know of, like can't even really like kind of comprehend based off of what's happened in the past. So the way I generalize this and the way that I frame this is that, and this is really funny, crypto is supposed to be trustless, right? You have blockchain, you don't have to trust an intermediary or third party. The biggest issue that I think social tokens can solve for an online community is trust. So the reason why I say that is that, put aside price action, because you can go to CoinGecko, you can go to other places like that. But there are like fascinating metrics that you can have, right? Where I own certain tokens and I've held them for a certain amount of time. And that's almost like a signal of like how healthy a community is. Because as the price is going up, people aren't selling. Versus prices going up and down, and you see the average token holder churning, right? So that gives you a different sense. And I think that kind of extrinsic value placed onto an online community, if done correctly, can it really provide insights into a community, right? Because that's the biggest thing. When you're launching a token, a social token, you're like, I don't know, is this a pump and dump? Or like, what's really going on here? And so there's a way to measure intrinsic value through this extrinsic value of exchange. And you can see it by like, we're thinking of metrics like how many people are tipping each other, or are they just like really greedy with their token? How many people are exiting back to layer one? And it's all those different kind of metrics that I think will like signal kind of health. And I don't want to say that like social tokens is an identity layer, because identity is such a huge rabbit hole. But if I hold a set of 20 social tokens and I know my allocation of those tokens, and I look up Matt's profile and he's like 70% kind of holding the same things, like it's not an identity, but I can kind of understand what Matt's about, what he's paying attention to, what he has skin in the game for. And so in that way, it serves as kind of like this interesting potential discovery mechanism as well.
Do we just match? Can we go on a date now?
Exactly. I'm gonna swipe left or right. Which way? Right? Like
high frequency social token matching engines.
That's right. Exactly. And then you have the ability for social tokens, these like fluid partnerships or collaborations, right? You have a musician like you're talking about, and they have a token. Well, yeah, revenue share, all of that kind of like financial kind of accounting stuff that we come to know, because that's kind of like the obvious thing when it comes to blockchain, right? But then there's opportunities where like that musician could hook up with a label that's on chain, or like a fashion label, right? And they can collab, right? And now they have this instant like partnership, but it's not contracts in terms of the legal term. They're all incentivized because they have each other's holdings. And so you can have these fluid dynamic partnerships, I think, that are token based as well. And then you open up the whole space when it comes to DAOs and voting and whatnot. I don't know exactly what it will look like. It probably will look like something that we don't quite understand yet. And that's kind of like the McLuhan, the medium is the message kind of thing, where, they're saying back in the day when they're inventing the film, they thought, okay, I'm just going to point it at a stage, vaudeville stage, and that's it, we're done. And then they're like, wait a second, you have multiple cameras. Oh, wait, you can actually have like post editing. And wait, you can have CGI, and then now you have your own film language. The medium kind of takes its own thing. And what we're drawing right now is based on things that we already are knowing, trying to apply to the blockchain. This is why you need that experimentation. I think this is why, like, the whole idea of, like, you know, back in the day when it came to social, how we're going to monetize, people didn't know. It's through trial and error and experimentation. But with that, I would have to say also, in this kind of euphoria of like the possibilities, it needs to be also tempered, right? Because remember, back in the day, what was Google's motto? Don't be evil. They nixed that. So it's like, what are we building? Like, in our exuberance and in our like trying to figure this out, we also have to kind of be careful and not repeat the mistakes of the past as well. And this is why exit and decentralization is still important in terms of a value system. But what does that exactly mean? I think it's a little bit naive to say that, like, if everything was decentralized, everything would be like, you know, rosy and whatnot. Because back in the day, I remember the beginning of Web 2.0, everyone was like, social media is great. What could ever go wrong with social media? That, not understanding the second, third order effects. So it's like having to like pursue the technology, but understand you're not building just to build. And why are you building? So there's a lot of context that actually, you know, need to be mindful of. Excitement tempered with you know, kind of realism and some
Yeah,
sobriety.
that's great stuff and great advice. I wanted to just touch on one last thing, and it was within what you just said. You touched on kind of the financialization of a social token like a few times. And I mean, we've sort of danced around it, like Alice can exit and she can go to layer one and she can swap her social token on Uniswap, and that can cover gas fees and all this stuff. So and then there's the extreme, like I mentioned, I think revenue share tokens. So a community token, a community could be a platform, a community could generate revenue from external sources, and then it could distribute revenue to its token holders. Do you think, and this is like sort of a like kind of like a loaded, just like kind of rigged question, but do you think like the financialization aspect like distracts us or sort of takes away from some of the social token components, like, and the ways that social tokens can be used? Do you think when finances get mixed up with social tokens and they start trading and they have value, do you think that ruins the experiment?
I think what it shows and what I've understood talking to creators and just normal people is that there isn't this well-articulated understanding and relationship with money, especially with creators. And that needs to be talked about. And that is super interesting because, you know, you need to have this, like, not in social tokens, you have to have a trader's mind and an investor's mind kind of at the same time. If you don't have that context, you don't, what are you playing for? Are you playing for the 2-year time horizon, 5, 10-year time horizon? What is that ROI, and how do you measure that? What does that look like to you? I think, you know, you can also take cues from online MMOs from back in the day, where, you know, if you have a virtualized economy and it's too easy to accrue tokens, or, you know, whatever that value is within the game becomes really boring because the incumbents just always dominate. So there's a lot to learn, I think, when it comes to where we're going. And, you know, I think it's multidimensional. But what I see in terms of mistake is a lot of people talking about social tokens and kind of reinventing the wheel. When you can go to GDC talks for the last 15, 20 years, and people, amazing people, game designers talking about a balanced economy, and then applying that to crypto. And, you know, basically crypto is just allowing us to LARP in real life, right? It's bringing the video game out to the real world, and that's basically what it is. And it's really just getting those incentives right. And I think we get caught up in terms of like this great future, but I think it's really just this incremental kind of, can we experiment to get to what we need to get to, right? And I think there's all these different approaches. I don't know exactly what will win out. I think there's great opportunity with it, but you need to not just go from 0 to 100, but like 0 to 1 to do, like, you got to take these baby steps. And that's the kind of like what we're trying to also create for Collab.Land. It's almost like, I think that would be a great value, the human aspect, because when it comes to like these online communities, what I see is people launching a token, have a Discord, and then they're having to deal with this barrage of like, let's do X, Y, and Z just to make the number go up now. And it doesn't align with the long-term incentive of the community organizer and the values. And it puts a lot of stress and mental burden. And people are like, I want to tap out. And then people are like, I don't even want to try social tokens because I don't even know what I'm going to get myself into. Like these social tokens at the beginning where you don't have an audience and you're building it up and you're starting day one with crypto and social tokens is one thing. But if you have 5 million subs and you want to launch a token, you're going to think about the downside risk of like, oh shit, I have to like manage this shitcoin for the rest of my life. Like, what's this going to do to my reputation? Right. And so it's like creating that space where you can experiment, but not, you know, have to deal with the hard reality. The blockchain never forgets. And what does that mean? And so it's like that human element of like, okay, well, get the best of breed community admins, get them into like a special group, like an alumni network or something, kind of like a YC, where like YC is, the value is really in their alumni network, right? That all that advice and all that mentorship. And this goes back to what we were talking about before, like positive sum, paying it forward. You know, that's the environment that we want to be in. And so the human aspect of Collab.Land is like supporting that system, because I think that, you know, just in general, especially with the pandemic, mental health has become top of mind. But I think especially with community admins and then put crypto on top of that, it can become very stressful because people are still trying to figure it out. So it's also that human aspect of creating that safe space.
I hear stories of you know, startups that went public and like CEOs with public companies. I mean, there's a constant psychological battle of dealing with, you know, like the fact that the company becomes like an overnight darling in public or crypto markets for that matter, and you have to be straight with your employees. You have to let them know that, you know, that what they do on a day-to-day basis isn't exactly, you know, why this price is going up or down. Like sometimes it's just the market, you know. So that's really good that you talked about that human aspect and the mental aspect. One last thing I wanted to ask about, and I'm not sure if I'm going to do a great job at asking this question, but I guess you did touch on it when you talked about YC and the alumni network and all of those people and all of that expertise. I still think that we, as humans, like, you know, we use money, but it's a very crude approximation of value, right? Like if I have an hour-long conversation with like a, you know, a YC alum or something like that, like I'm going to get a lot out of that conversation, but it's a conversation and that's not captured, right? Like that's just knowledge transfer and a lot of arbitrary things that, but now I will go turn that into potentially like work, or I'll go have another conversation with somebody and like pass on a little sort of piece of information that will save some startup founder from shooting themselves in the foot, and that will generate wealth. How much do you think that like this social token experiment is working towards capturing that value that was previously uncaptured with sort of like, I guess, cruder centralized forms of money, fiat currency, things like that? Like, do you feel that these social token experiments, and once we get through experimentation and they become more sort of mature and part of our fabric, do you think we'll get better at capturing value in that sense?
That's a very kind of tricky question because that gets to the heart of what I think the question is. Can everything be priced, right? I don't know if that's a great question, because there's a story, Dave Graeber has Debt First 5,000 Years, and he has a story of son turns 18 years old, father goes to the son, gives him a bill, tracked every single purchase. The son goes, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, I everything that I bought you, son. This is how much it costs. This is how much you owe me." Son pays it and never talks to the father again. You have intrinsic motivation, trust-based relationships, and transactional-based relationships. Does every single relationship need to be transactional? I don't know, right? So we talk about extrinsic value, intrinsic value. Maybe some things should not be priced.
Tristan, what about the example? What comes to my mind is I buy a lot of books, but I never know, like I bought the book for $10 and is there a value of like $1,000 from this book? Or so in this case, there's no like, there's maybe a relationship, but with maybe that person or somebody I never talked to before or will ever. So like in this case, can you price, do you think? Or it's also kind of, it's probably unclear, right?
This is kind of like when I say it's almost like a dangerous question to ask. Like, should we price? I think there can be a system. And what does that system look like when everything is priced? Every single transaction, every single conversation, whatever, right? AI, you have some GPT-3 algorithm being able to like, or some prediction market, whatever, sci-fi kind of reality you want to go into to be able to price everything. Do we want that world? Do we want that future even? So this is why, you have to ask, like, can it be done? Is maybe not. Do we ever want that to happen? I don't know. So these are kind of like where you kind of get into the like philosophical moral territory of the technology and like kind of how it like shapes culture, right? I mean, you see when I was starting out and then you saw the web boom and bust, and then the future self came to me and said, you know what? In 2021, there are going to be these riots at the White House and social media is going to play a part. I'm going to go, you're effing crazy. Like this, that's not a possibility in my mind.
I got a funny story about that transactional stuff. So sorry, I don't want to lose that transactional bit. Like, should everything be transactional? I just have a funny story. So I got a volunteer little brother from the Big Brothers Big Sisters program. He's like 21 now. At the time, he was maybe like 16 or 17 and just graduating high school. So he described his friends sitting around at McDonald's, like on a lunch break. And one kid says to another kid, "Hey, that's a cool shirt. Where did you get it?" And then they're all friends. Like they all go to school together. They're all pretty close. And the kid with the cool sweater looks at the kid who asked him where he got it. And he goes, "Buy me a burger and I'll tell you." And I mean, like, and that's like how they normally talk to each other, right? And I'm not trying to categorize like all kind of Gen Zs as this, but I mean, this kid was born in like 99. So, I mean, this is a different sort of group of people. And so I think that, for better or for worse, and I'll tie it back to what you just said about social media. For better or for worse, like, you had Arab Spring all the way up to this most recent event at the White House. I mean, this is like 2 days ago, right? So for better or for worse, we live in that world now, right? And we lived through that 2016 election. And so I'm looking at this example that I get from my little brother here, and he's shown me so much stuff. And actually, we were walking along the beach one time in Vancouver, and we stopped, and he recognized someone, and he sort of just kind of goes, "Oh, hey," right? And I go, "So who's that?" And he goes, "Oh, it's a friend of mine." And I'm thinking to myself, well, then, if you want to stop and talk to her, you can stop and talk to her. And he goes, "Oh, no, she's just like an Instagram friend." And then I'm like, okay, what does that mean? And then he starts describing how like they compartmentalize friends and as according to like different apps. Like, these are my Snap friends, these are my Instagram friends, these are my Facebook friends. So they bin friends based on platforms and stuff. And it's kind of like I don't know. It's different. It's not like me. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't think of friends like that. Like, that's not how I process stuff. So for better or for worse, like, we do live in this world. So Gen Gen Zs are coming up with big app platforms, and then they think in terms of app platforms. It's kind of interesting, and they do transact a lot, so they're like always buying and selling things from each other. I think Poshmark, which is like a buy and sell like marketplace for luxury goods, just filed like an S1, so it's going public. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I don't get it. I feel old.
I mean, I think what your point is, and I was like, wait, you're calling me out on my age, right? Because, you know, we when I was growing up, like, online dating was totally looked down upon. Like, it was like not something that you did. It meant like you could not transact in the real world. But now people are swiping left and right all the
exactly. And if you go up to somebody in like the mall or like in a bar or something, and you don't previously like know them from somewhere, you're like, now it's super creepy. But back in the day, it was like oh, cool, you know, like, so this guy has the balls to talk to me, you know, or this girl, right? And it used to be a cool thing. It was like, whoa, confidence, you know.
Now it's creepy up.
Right. But, you know, I mean, it also goes down to like, if you're going to someone's house and you ring the doorbell before you text them, it's rude, right? Like, you have to text them before you say you're here, right? So it's like the social norms are changing. And this is why I think when it comes to how social tokens and interactions and this blurring of offline and online in the backdrop of the pandemic, people being online more, it kind of like brings the fast forwards the future to the present by a few years, who knows how much. We're going to have this like new interactions, right? I think I've done more Zooms this year than I've done like video conferencing 10 years combined. And so like it provides this new social interaction model, which we don't really know. And this, I think, only can become available through emergent design and through iteration. So I don't know what this will look like, but to think that I know what it looks like just puts me in a box to not really see what it actually will look like. So trying to keep an open mind and trying to understand and like kind of recontextualize things and like try to really keep my biases at check. Because you're absolutely right. Because for me, like the transactional versus trust relationship, it might be the Overton window for that, like what is acceptable, what isn't, changes generationally. And it has to do with technology. I don't believe culture shapes technology. I think technology shapes culture because technology is a tool, right? That advances civilization, that advances. So like you said, like now we live in a world where these kids, they compartmentalize themselves with that. We didn't have apps before. There's no context to do that, right? But this is the new reality. So I think that we got to, figure it out, but also kind of be careful in terms of there's one part embracing, but kind of like being mindful.
And another threat I wanted to just mention, make it more explicit. I think we briefly touched on it, but it was implicit, is to say that I think financial literacy is very important, right? I feel like when I came to US like 2007, and I studied like a little bit of like very basic stuff about personal wealth, and then I kind of like realized that a lot of people actually don't know it. Like it's very basic, but people don't know this kind of stuff. Like for example, like how to use credit cards and debt and many other things like this. But then also like in crypto, I noticed, like to your point about earlier about having trader mentality and then having investor mentality. I know of some investment funds that got wrecked in 2017, 2018, because they knew about maybe investment, but not about trading side of it. So I was wondering, like, do we also need to bridge some kind of educational gap around financial literacy or something? Like maybe we need to give kids, I don't know, like a wallet and start like teaching them young or something. Like, I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I encourage my kids to get into crypto, and I've become like the crypto dad. So in a sense, I've done the opposite what I want to do. Like I want to, because I'm the dad and I'm saying crypto is cool. They're like, crypto sucks. So I'm like trying to back off on that a little bit. It's this like reverse psychology kind of thing. But I do think like you're seeing this in the creator economy right now, right? So you're seeing in the creator economy, these creators not making as much money. You're seeing startups go and arbitrage and say, you know what, as a startup, instead of paying these ridiculous CPMs to Facebook and to Google, I'm going to give this creator 1% of my company, and they will take this equity in exchange. And, I get free advertising. And then this creator has this potential of earning like this huge multiple, but they don't understand this. Like they don't get that long-term investment, and like taking multiple bets and kind of understanding that literacy to your point of view. So I do think like there's opportunities abound for like this arbitrage from like trading, right? But people don't see it because there isn't that view, that perspective. And I think like these next gen creators are going to need to have that kind of financial insight because they're basically entrepreneurs, right? And they're going to need to understand that. And they're going to also need that human aspect if they're going to do community tokens of how to lead their community or lead their audience. So it's multi-dimensional, right? Like, once you, and this is what technology does, it commoditizes things. So you have to like have it multi-dimensional. So you have to have trading, investing, some legal, some programming, some marketing, and you have to have this like mix. And I think that's going to be this like, bachelor's degree in blockchain. It's not just going to be technical.
I think that's a really good sort of analysis of we've got YouTube, Instagram, etc., putting the squeeze on creators, and then we have other people coming in to kind of see that as an arbitrage opportunity. And as far as I know, some of the people building influencer platforms, building things like for the creator economy, like Lee Jin just launched this thing called Side Hustle Stack, and it's like blowing up. I mean, it just shows you that there's like pent up demand for stuff like that. And then I think a thesis that's like, a little further out, but probably just around the corner is like what you were talking about, like getting 1% equity in the platform that you're creating the content on. And that sort of feeds into Jesse Walden's kind of ownership economy stuff, right? So I think we're on the right path and we're kind of like experimenting in that direction. And I'm again, like you said, like, let's be cautious about where we're going. Let's be cautious about how we're building these things, because we do run the risk of like getting so excited to go towards the like, oh, everybody owns the platform, that it ends up maybe doing something weird, like it'll flip or rotate in a way that we didn't expect, and then all of a sudden, then somebody's seeing another opportunity and arbitraging on that, right? So and that's sort of like, there's an explosion of stuff, and then there's aggregation. There's sort of like, there's always people talking about how even with decentralized platforms, like how things could re-centralize, right? Like if a platform is owned by creators, well, what do we know about creators? I mean, like there's somewhat of a power law distribution. So like what ends up happening when it all just kind of funnels up towards like the top 10% of creators, right? So that could have adverse effects, and we have to like kind of, be aware of these things as we sort of make these future platforms. I don't have any more questions, but James, this was like awesome. Like so many cool ideas and so much like exploration there. And it was like great to hear all about Abridged and the journey there. And like where you guys are is you're very close to a lot of these ideas that we discussed. And you're very close to not only just experiments, but actually, having this stuff happen. Like it seems like it's right on the edge of, just going back in the conversation a little bit, it's right on the edge of being able to drop Alice tokens on an L2 or a very fast L1, and then have her exit and swap to a pool and cash out and be able to pay her rent or her cell phone bill or something, right? Because she started as an active contributor to a community, right? With some content or with some like tipping a bunch of people and sort of being a curator, like this is very close. Like, I feel like this is just around the corner.
Yeah. It's just trying to like, just be just ahead of the market, and then just help provide that direction. So it goes in a value aligned direction. And that's kind of this kind of momentum that we're seeing at Collab.Land, trying to like edge or nudge in what we think is the most kind of aligned value way with the rest of the ecosystem or the industry.
Yeah, that was very fascinating. Where can people find more about Collab.Land?
Go to Collab.Land, COLLAB.LAND, and you'll see a bunch of changes happening soon.
Nice. Thanks a lot. That was very good.
Thank you.